Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Someone needs to do a wellness check on Rachel Maddow. Frankly, I think anybody with leftoid family members, you should probably hop in your car right now, drive to their primary place of residence, knock on the door, and just ask them if they're alright. Because trust me when I tell you, the lefties are not alright. You know, we're in election season when the polls are highly malleable. I guess we could call them volatile. When the polling numbers are going back and forth or shifting in one direction quite dramatically, you know that it's getting real. And trust me when I tell you, it is getting, at this point, I'd say even beyond real. We're going to call it what we always call it. It's a Trump surge, I think the likes of which has literally never been seen before. Joe Biden continues to crater, or honestly, I don't even know if it's really cratering. I think Joe Biden is just so stagnant, so old, he just doesn't have the ability to really turn his political career around at this point. He's just kind of there, which doesn't exactly work so well in the middle of a campaign. Maybe in the circumstances of 2020, but as an incumbent president, not exactly a good situation, not exactly a good look. Folks, we've been excited by Donald Trump taking 2-3 percentage leads in particular polls. I think the biggest lead that I've seen so far is +4 or +5. Well, a lefty poll was just released. ABC News / Washington Post, two leftist outlets who generally produce polling results that tend to favor Democrats. And well, trust me when I tell you this is not an exaggeration, this is not a lie. That poll just released showing a +10 lead for Donald Trump. +10, folks. The lefties are not all right. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so take a look at this. 2024 general election poll from ABC News / Washington Post. This is with 890 registered voters, so we're not talking about polling adults, we're not talking about polling likely voters, registered voters, which I think is probably one of the more accurate ways to poll these days, considering voter turnout has increased so much with mail-in ballots and whatnot. We got a 10-point lead for Donald Trump. And if we take all of the most recent polling data, well, it's looking quite interesting. Either Trump or Joe Biden are in a statistical tie, which of course pretty much signals a Trump victory, or Trump's ahead by 2.
I said, hold up, wait a minute.
Or Trump's ahead by 10. That's a hypothetical double-digit lead. That goes from a contested election, if those numbers stick, to a possible electoral landslide right around the corner. If Donald Trump maintains this kind of a polling lead, he's likely to get over 300 electoral votes in the Electoral College. All of Donald Trump's supposed weaknesses are kind of vanishing in a way. We covered a CNN segment not too long ago. I think it was with Jim Acosta.
I don't think there's any case of it doing so, but it helps to remind ourselves of that. Look, obviously this is a primary season, but it's about winning a general election. And Donald Trump's poll numbers are already in the cellar among independent voters. I mean, 2/3 of them say they don't want to see him be elected president.
The argument made during that segment is that Donald Trump, especially with the indictments, is going to be scaring away independent voters, spooky stuff. Apparently, Donald Trump is deeply unpopular with independents. Yeah, I'm not so sure that that's the case when he's up by 10 points in a poll. It's statistically impossible to be up 10 points in a poll and be down with independents. And let's use another more recent lefty poll. This one's from YouGov. Donald Trump's still in the lead at 50 points, Biden at 49, but when we're looking at independents, they split for Trump at 57 to 42. That's a 15-point lead with independents for Donald Trump. Nearly every factor that you would need to win an election is in place for Donald Trump to secure a victory here. That same ABC poll found a couple interesting things here. The first is a concept that we speak about every election season, voter enthusiasm. There's a pretty significant voter enthusiasm gap benefiting Republicans, especially when it comes to age demographics.
There's also this. We found an enthusiasm gap between the two parties. We asked folks on a scale of 1 to 10, how enthusiastic are you about the presidential election? And you can see Republican to Democrat, there is a gap right there. Where's the lag for Democrats? We found a couple places. Non-white voters, you could see significantly less enthusiastic than white voters. And then how about this age gap? The youngest group of voters who Democrats have been trying to get excited and motivated, nearly 50-point gap there.
So really an uphill battle to try to make sure voters don't stay home if you're Democrats.
Republicans are more enthused, more ready to go to the polls, and older voters, which tend to lean Republican, are enthused at a rate of more than double younger voters. Joe Biden cannot win unless he gets young people to the polls. What's he going to do this time? Promise student loan forgiveness? Yeah, been there, done that, tried that before. People simply don't believe it anymore, and they're right to not believe it because the whole thing was one massive vote-grabbing scam. You know, there's a reason why there's no enthusiasm behind Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is not the guy. He's not the guy that Democrats want to be voting for, literally. He may be the incumbent president, but Democrats don't want him.
There's clearly a lack of enthusiasm about the president himself because we asked primary voters on the Democratic side, do you want options next year besides Biden? 59% said yes, they do. This is not a normal number for an incumbent. We asked the same question a year before Donald Trump sought re-election of Republicans. Only 37% wanted more choices then. That's a very high number.
You know, I don't see how this is a strong strategy to win a general election. Republicans, I mean, they're trying to take down Donald Trump, but the will of the voter reigns supreme. We're seeing an actual Democratic nomination process. Republican voters will choose their next president or next presidential candidate. That person at this point seems to be Donald Trump. Democrats, on the other end, obviously don't want sleepy, creepy, piss pants Biden, but they don't have a choice. He's being forced on them by the Democrat establishment, who views him as the only option to beat Donald Trump. Well, that right there might be their undoing. You can't just force an old fool on the voters and then expect people to be overly enthused to head to the polls to vote for some geriatric hair-sniffing weirdo. You know, it's just not working out the way Nancy Pelosi and her friends probably wanted it to. In terms of polling metrics, it seems as though they cannot retain their core voters. Young voters are falling off in droves, and then this is also happening. We have another set of data to add to the most recent Fox News poll, suggesting that black voters are ditching Biden at an incredible rate. Joe Biden's approval rating with black voters in 2021 was 80%. Fast forward 2 years later, that number dropped 17 points and is now down to 63%. You know, Joe Biden's first impression with black voters wasn't exactly a strong one. Obviously, he had the Obama vice presidential factor, but telling people this,
if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
Being the architect of the crime bill and mass incarceration, I mean, the list goes on and on and on of, let's call it, racial insensitivity coming from Joe Biden. It seems as though the whole thing was kind of like a ticking time bomb. Eventually, it was going to come full circle, and it seems as though it finally is. Black voters are done with this guy. I'm not going to go as far as to say that black voters are done with the Democrat Party, because I don't think that's going to happen for generations. But I think a good chunk of black voters are done with Joe. They've seen it. They've seen their paychecks become weaker and weaker. They've seen gas prices. They've seen all the chaos, the increase of crime in their neighborhoods. And what's Joe Biden doing? Well, literally nothing. Sending your hard-earned tax dollars to Ukraine, and then probably tweeting about some nonsense, or not even really tweeting about some nonsense, having some 20-year-old journalism student who manages his Twitter account tweet about a bunch of useless nonsense woke crap. Or I don't know, tweet about like the cost of Taylor Swift tickets or some nonsense, which seems to be the next important issue for the Biden administration. Ticket fees. An important issue, kind of, you know, like it's something that I think both sides of the aisle could probably come to terms on and write some piece of legislation on, but not exactly high up the totem pole or high up the priorities list for your average American worker and average American citizen currently struggling. You know, the messaging and the campaigning from the Biden team has been so insanely awful. It's been such an incredible farce. Literally, all he had to do was just be present at certain moments. Let's talk about, let's say, his response to the wildfires in Hawaii. All he had to do was get on that jet and immediately go there and just not talk about his Corvette or his own personal problems. All he had to do was show up and then promise FEMA aid. He couldn't get the job done. It's such an incredibly high level of incompetence. Cannot get a single good day in the press, which is interesting because the media is literally just like waiting for one thing so they can write 1,000 puff pieces in a day. But Joe Biden can't do the bare minimum. It's an absolute train wreck, and it seems like Donald Trump is just, you know, walking around, sitting there, standing there, whatever it is. It's an absolute disaster, and Donald Trump is simply sitting there picking up the pieces. To be completely honest with you, I don't even think Trump is doing a good job campaigning right now. It's pretty early, things are messy, it's the Republican nomination process, and he's not even involving himself. He's doing little TV appearances here and there, but for the most part, he's not really campaigning so well right now, or even campaigning at all, I'd argue. But it honestly doesn't seem to matter because it seems like Joe Biden's time, his honeymoon period is over, and his career is coming to a crashing end. Call it hopium, call it copium. I honestly don't care. I'm gonna believe it. I have to believe it. I'm simply not going to entertain the possibility of a Joe Biden resurgence or comeback, because I honestly can't think of many worse scenarios than that. Anyways, it's looking good. Trump is surging, a plus 10 lead, a plus 15 lead with independents in the NBC poll. It's looking good, and that's pretty much the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.